Is this fear? Is this the ultimate expression of it? Where feelings take over and present themselves so powerfully as they override the signals to the brain, mimic sensation, override it. For I have never been more afraid in all my days. But my stomach hurts so. Some say that fear is like butterflies in the stomach. I have felt this many times over the course of my life. Many times. When I was young, and the gangs would come and raid the manufactorums, they slew all and then stopped. Took everything that was not bolted down, then ran off screaming again. I remember one such raid. I was young. I hid while it went on. The anger, the rage of them. They were like the sewer rats that the Arbeites always called them, but as vicious as well. I thought the gangers the worst thing in the universe. Nothing could be worse than they, surely. The Emperor would not permit it, surely. How wrong I was. How pathetically naive I was. Fear. I felt it most potently again when I was inducted into the Planetary Defence Force. Oh, I had my fill of those times when machines broke and scores of my fellow workers were crushed or smashed or taken down into the pits with segments of the manufactorum. I had brawls, had my rations taken from me by thugs or rivals. I had my fill of fear. Some nights I feared I would not wake up, a thin smile left on my neck in the night, my red juices pooled below my bunk, now browned. But that was the fear of the evil within my own kind, within humans. The xenos. They are another level. I experienced terror when I was shown footage of the greenskins. They had raided in the northern continent before, but that had been decades ago. Barely in living memory amongst us thralls of the manufactorum, so we had never really seen them, did not know of them in the south. I felt it when they unleashed just a handful of them on us. We milled in the square that day, not yet even received our uniforms. We were told they had to be earned, and they will be earned today. So we stood with our lasguns in ranks and columns, the ones we had only just received drill in the day before. I puffed out my chest as we all did, pride beaming from us. We thought this was going to be a ceremony. It was not. It was a trial. The gates behind our ranks opened and they barreled into us, roaring and swinging their heavy melee weapons. Their first impact carried 2 entire squads. We panicked. We ran. But the doors to the square were closed, the walls tall, and at their top were lines of experienced PDF, training their guns down but not firing. They did this to us in our first week. They unleashed greenskins on us. I was one of the first to throw up when we reached the walls. Panic. But, to my credit, I think, I was also the first to then wipe my mouth, hawk and spit, and train my lasgun on the orc scum and yank on the trigger. I yanked it, of course, that day. Fire splashing all over the place. But it started the others. They turned, and we evaporated at least 5 of our comrades with lasgun fire, as they were between us and the greenskin charge. But we got them. With so many of us firing, we got them. When it was over and the ground cleared, nothing moved but a few crippled but not slain in the greenskins' wake, we realised that there'd only been a few of them. None more were coming, and we were shown the value and strength of the lasgun that day. In clusters in ranked fire, it was victory. It was like fire from the Emperor's own eyes, cutting down the foes of humanity. But the thing I remember most about that day was the fear. We never faced the orcs. They did not raid south, but they did not even raid the northern continent, not for years. We thought they might have killed each other, might have just butchered themselves into oblivion, but that was not the case. Fear. The next time I felt it this bad was only days ago. We had been mobilized. The entire planet was on highest alert. There was activity everywhere. The walls reinforced. All entries to the hive closed and sealed shut. But that did not save us either, for they came from below. The gangers. They were the first to attempt exodus to the mid-tiers. We felt contempt for them as we gunned them down. Like primitive tribes with too much tech, they could bully and slaughter the defenseless, but they were not prepared for ranks and lines of accurate las fire. We swept them away and believed that they had just been cowards and opportunists who had struck while our attention was supposed to be on other things. The scum. But when the mutants from the lower levels, the indigents, the harmless beggars also came up in their hordes, we knew it was bad. Orders were to destroy the mutants, of course, but to let the others pass. We needed to conserve our energy packs. They told us of things coming up from the foundations of the hive. They did not know if they were new, a xenos force that had bypassed our upper defenses, or as some had said, that they were old, ancient, that they were something that the hive had been built upon, and now they had arisen, and they were both angry and hungry in equal measure. Few had actually set eyes on these things, this new threat. Anyone who was near their advent was destroyed so swiftly that few made it out. Then my fear hit again. That top 10 of all emotional moments in one's life. Another one. I had never known real love. Never known much more than fatigue, a bone-deep weariness from my shifts. Hatred towards the gangers, or fear. And it was again that it struck. So hard that I could barely move. I could not feel. I was removed from my body. I was watching it picked. This was not real. But it was. And they were real. And they were here. The endless tides of men and women were still pouring at our lines. These were now the unhealthy, the wounded, the lame, for they were slowest. And the screaming started. It swept from the long tunnel and reached a crescendo when it hit our lines. The sea of humans were being consumed. They had come. We saw them in so many dazzling forms. Huge ones that made a pathway through the stragglers by stamping and goring them as they came. Behind and to the sides were shoals of things that jumped onto the backs of the fleeing and tore them apart with long stabbing limbs. A carpet of tiny things came behind them. And above them all was a thing in the background. It swept down so damn fast, striking all in a strafing run with its tail. Those hit had differing reactions. Some would just gasp and move on. Others would almost instantly convulse and then scream as they became a fountain of blood. Things were bursting from them. Then those who had run, they also succumbed. And as the xenos got within range, we were ordered to fire. The few special weapons teams and the one Lehman Russ battle tank we had all concentrated their fire on the huge things, cutting them down. But there were always more. The leaping things about the size of a man we infantry shot down, thousands of lasers scything into their ranks as they advanced down the tight confines. It was dark, but for the fire of our guns, the explosions that had torn into the horror before us. And it was in the panic, in the confusion, in the dark, that I felt a thump on my back, a push that I staggered from. But when I turned around, there was nothing there. I swung my head to look at the people next to me. Someone had a lousy sense of timing for a joke. The sound of wind over my head. I saw what was happening. My friends all along our line. They were screaming, they were staggering around. As I looked on, The fear began to attack my innards as it had never done before. Because the people around me were now bursting, their skin erupting and those things coming out of them, crawling and burrowing out of them, eating what was left as they are growing before my very eyes. Like some educational picture show about how things grow over time, they are literally becoming things in front of me. My stomach hurts. Is it the terror? I have not soiled myself, yet it hurts. How can fear hurt? I take my lasgun and fire it over my shoulder as I run. I run. I stagger. I stagger, clutching my stomach. I am too slow. They overtake me. A carpet of these tiny horrors is passing me, going around me. All forward, not to catch or surround me. The things do not attack me. I slow down, not understanding. Am I blessed? Has the Emperor made me invisible to these things? Anathema to them. Even the larger bounding things are moving past me. They do not strike. Am I going to live? I stop and fall into myself on the floor, curling into a ball. My fear is so much I feel it would kill me, despite being now immune to the xenos. Blessed. My fear. It consumes me from my innards. I scream into the high ceiling as I feel it manifesting inside me. As if summoned, it is taking me over, tearing me apart. The scream that tore from the throat of the man was his last. A Tyranid ripper tore through his stomach, then devoured him to the last. It was engorged and grew in size, then joined the endless tides of its kind that went forever up into the hive, consuming everything and everyone in their path. And above them all, the Parasite of Mortrex swept, increasing the tides with every pass over the defenders' lines. Welcome, gentle listener. I am Baldermort, your faithful servant, and I wish to introduce you to the forces, factions, and units of the Warhammer 40k universe, the grim darkness of the far future, where there is no time for peace, there is only time for war. And today, we shall be looking at a Tyranid bioform that was thought to be consigned to the annals of history. A nasty bioform that can make its enemies into allies without the use of psychic or warp-based powers. Well, sort of. Of course, I can only be speaking of the Parasite of Mortrex. Yes, a new figure has been released, and I am chasing this meta. I don't do it that often, so why not? Now I have not met this being in a very long time. To be honest, I had forgotten he existed. So it's time for that which I am known for most, I guess. And so, as usual, for the very basics, let us lean on existing wisdom. To quote, the Parasite of Mortrex. The Parasite of Mortrex is a unique Tyranid bioform, the result of a Norn-Queen's genetic experiments and tests to enhance its broods. Named after its most disturbing ability and the planet where it was first encountered, the Parasite of Mortrex is a bat-winged Tyranid creature evolved from Tyranid warrior stock. Next to its multiple claw appendages and fanged maw, the Parasite of Mortrex has a barbed tail tipped with a hollow tube, like a snake's fang, capable of implanting its still-living victims with ripper parasite embryos. Within solar hours, or even after a duration as short as a few heartbeats, the ripper parasites mature and will devour the unwilling host from the inside out to fuel their accelerated growth. The Imperial fortress world of Mortrex was one of the most heavily defended planets in Segmentum Ultima, a world where fortifications sprouted from every mountainside and bastions punctuated the landscape. For solar days, when Hive Fleet Kraken attacked, this formidable defense held back the vicious hordes. However, during the 10th day of the invasion, the Astra Militarum forces defending Mortrex encountered a winged bioform that they had never seen before. Without warning, the monster dove towards the human entrenchments, stabbing at the Imperial guardsmen with lightning-quick strikes of its tail. The creature's victims were thus injected with ripper parasites, many of which grew to maturation within a few heartbeats, devouring their host from the inside out. Amidst agonized death screams, a swarm of rippers ruptured through cracked bones and torn flesh as they emerged in a spray of blood. The few survivors told of the new TYRANID threat, a horrifying creature that implants organisms into its still-living prey. They called this creature the Parasite, and all knew that to face it was to risk the most horrific death imaginable. 2 weeks later, the planet of Mortrex was overrun by vast ravenid tides of ripper swarms. All that remained was a single astropathic transmission that warned of the Parasite. Fortunately for the Imperium of Man, it has not been sighted since the Battle of Mortrex. Like other TYRANID experimental bioforms, including the Red Terror or the Doom of Malantai, it remains to be seen whether that HIVE fleet's Norn-Queen will judge the bioform successful enough to warrant its genetic maturation and ultimate full production, or if it will remain an ultimately unfruitful genetic testbed, never to be produced again. End quote. And I think we've just had the answer to that question, for a new model has come out, and it's a corker. And the Parasite is another great sign to me, for we have seen a huge Necron force refresh and lots of new models in Ninth. The same with the Elder, and of course, the Imperium's war machine is constantly increased, being Sisters of Battle and Primaris being the most dramatic signs of this. I think this is a great sign, because Games Workshop seem to be doing what we have all been crying out for so long. They're spreading the love. Engaging with the Xenos factions and giving them not only good rules, okay, that is always arguable and I fully expect a few disgruntled players who have just been nerfed to stand against it, but also in new figures. And it is the new figures, the new units, the new rules combined that makes it more engaging for the players of these factions. Now I know a lot of Imperial players are almost annoyed when Xenos factions get increases, like the recent furore about the Tau. But think on it this way. If there are no new rules, figures, and videos, then there will one day be no Xenos to purge from the galaxy. So, Imperial players, learn about your adversaries, learn about that which you will be fighting. Watch those Xenos videos like a hunter marking his prey. Because if you don't, if you keep just watching videos about your Imperium faction, it may just end up in every army being an Imperial one before long. Because exposure means interest. And that, as a Blood Angels player myself, is a universe I do not want to fight in, a setting I do not want to play in. For I do so love purging the Xenos with fire and fury and chainswords ripped. So let's throw them some love. Let's give them some backup. Let's try to maintain some of the interest in these factions. Because if we don't, as I have said, one day they simply won't be played at all. And I don't want 40k to be the Horus Heresy Mark II. Food for thought. Now I would like to draw your attention to an excellent chap and a great service, the Magnet Baron. He's got a plethora of supplies you can be assured will be reliable. Magnets, of course, but also new stands, glues, etc. Now I adore most of what GW does, but let's be honest, some of the stands, the new swooping ones that attach to the backpack in an arc, they are wonderful to look at in a display, but they are not for the hardcore player, as they snap so blasted often. So I'm going to be moving my sorry lot to the ones provided by the Magnet Baron. Easier, more stable, so I can transport and play with some of my Inceptors, which haven't been played with, and other figures that I have blatantly ignored due to the frustration of the re-gluing pre- or even mid-battle. So check out his site and have a look. He's a lovely chap to boot. So go have a butcher's if you're in need of anything excellent to make your life just a little bit easier as a player. Links in the description, and many thanks for listening. I have been Baldermort, your faithful servant. I hope you've enjoyed this brief introduction to the Parasite of Mortrex. If so, then please consider liking and subscribing. If you do, then hit the notifications button, as I would not want you to miss out. If you see the worth in what we are doing, then do also consider joining our Patreon, as I often do, say, box openings or rants and other such things. Or giving the video a share if that is beyond your present scope. It would be a great boon. Now, no matter what you do today, do try to make some time for fun. Toodaloo.